We thought that we would start this panel by inviting the artist in the form of the film that Marie Puig so generously provided. So please enjoy a short screening of the film.
Yeah, it's the film La Pluie, Projekt für einen Text. Und der ist auch in der Ausstellung im Museum für Gegenwartskunst zu sehen und ist ein sehr wichtiger Film. Ich glaube, für Broodthaers überhaupt, auch für die Ausstellung. Warum erzähle ich nach dem Film? Der ist auf 16 mm gemacht, 1969 und dauert 2 Minuten. Film ab, bitte. Ich vergaß zu sagen, dass der Film stumm ist. Okay, vielen Dank. Das war der Film La Pluie, Projekt für einen Text. I was just told that the talk is supposed to be in English. Is that necessary or can I continue in German? Please, if you prefer English, just raise your hand. Okay, there are enough people. I'm sorry so that I started in German. I didn't know about this. I hope I can switch. So this film is shown in the exhibition Le Corbeau et le Renard. It's called La Pluie, Project for a Text. And it was quite important for me to have that piece in the show because it says a lot about Broodthaers' work, I think. So firstly, we have somebody sitting in a garden writing, and after a while it starts to rain, and the person simply ignores the rain and continues writing. And in the way through the rain, the writing becomes drawing or painting. And the letters, the speech becomes some kind of blurry, nebulous, abstract thing that we might consider as a visual product as well, as some kind of painting or drawing maybe. And first I found it important because Broodthaers he was working and defining himself as a poet for a very long time in his career, in his life. And I think around 40 or a bit later, he started actually to enter the stage of contemporary art and consciously call himself an artist and not a poet anymore. And secondly, it's saying a lot about his work and the interest of the show that very much looks at this, how speech enters the field of visual production. And that's exactly what's happening in the film. And also I like this humor in the film because So on the one hand, you could say it's a very serious work. It's dedicated to Stéphane Mallarmé in a way. His work, his famous poem, A Throw of Dice, that's meant to be one of the first modern poems that continues language into a field of visual production. But also it has this humor that you immediately see, okay, this is a very artificial rain. In fact, it's made by Broodthaers' then wife and two art students from Düsseldorf, one quite famous today, Blinky Palermo. They stand on a ladder next to Broodthaers and do it with what's a Gießkanne? Can you help me? The thing you pour water on flowers or... And yeah, so it's mixing up these both levels of Broodthaers' work. That on the one hand, it's a very serious reflection on art production and writing and the relationship between text and image production. But on the other hand, it's also something that's conducted with a certain humor. And I don't know if I'm right about it, but as it's done in his back garden in his house in Brussels, I think it's also looking, and with the students helping and his wife helping, it also seems to me like quite a spontaneous idea behind it. Maybe that's something that I can ask Marie Puck later. So
hello. It's actually in the back garden where he had done his museum. Also, Blinky Palermo, it's true, he was visiting the museum of Broodthaers, but he did not go with the rain, with the water in this film. But it was my mother who was there with a Gießkanne. Yeah. I don't remember the name. But Blinky Palermo wasn't there during this film. It was just the cameraman and my mother and me, most probably as a child. Thank you.
When you say that the work exists on this threshold of a writer leaving writing but never quite, because writing is always there, entering visual art, never fully, these things could be paintings, could be objects. I guess that was also quite a challenge for putting together an exhibition, no? You were talking to me about the fact that when you were bringing the things back from collections, sometimes they had gone to very different places in the collection. If you could talk a little bit about that, what Broodthaers' relationship to media also means for the logic of how collections usually operate.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're looking at with that question. Yeah, there's a funny thing to tell. I don't want to fall into anecdotes, but it's true, for example, how he's mixing different media or doing a work that is not only consisting of a painted canvas or just a photograph or a film. So, for example, the work that forms the title of the exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Le Corbeau et le Renard, it consists of a film, it consists of 5 prints, photograms, photographical reproductions, a map that comes with them, and also it consists of 2 screens that the film can be projected on, and that are pre-printed screens. So they are not like in cinema normally empty or just white canvases. They are already Broodthaers printed on the screens onto which he then projects the film. So in a museum, what's happening still today, but of course especially in the 70s, is that the media department says, okay, we take care for the film. The etching and drawing department would say we take those photograms or drawings, and the object and painting department, they would say we take care for those screens that Broodthaers printed on. So you have 3 different departments in the museum or in the collection that are responsible for one work. And of course, it's very difficult that these departments communicate with each other. And I think today, of course, we are. It's working much better, these things, but that's due to Broodthaers and due to these works where he mixes up different media. In one installation, Rosalind Krauss called it multimedia installations. And now we are used to it, also on an institutional level. But at the time when Broodthaers did it, we were not. And especially institutions were not. So he really opened a door by creating a lot of, Verwirrung?
Creating some confusion.
Yeah, exactly.
In the
but what you were asking, sorry, and I encountered that confusion. So for that work, for example, I had to puzzle together all the different elements. I got the film from one collection, I got the 5 prints from another collection, and I got the screens from a third collection, or in this case, the estate and Marie Broodthaers. So that was when you, as a curator, you encounter the value of a work due to the difficulties, actually, to reconstruct it.
I remember once listening to a talk by Mi-Won Kwon, who was talking about that very fact that in the 1960s, people start messing with the logic of the archive and the kind of power that institutions have to decide what a piece is. Now, is it a sculpture? It goes into that department. Is it a painting? It goes into that department. And you, as you say, we still encounter the confusion today when piecing together one piece means talking to 3 different places, as you were saying.
Of course, that's a super productive confusion. No?
It's a very productive confusion. One element that you introduce in the show, which captures, I guess, a lot of the humor of the work, surprisingly, and it never occurred to me, is the comma. So one little hero of the Broodthaers show is just the sign of the comma that travels from the first space into the exhibition through the work of Marcel Broodthaers, but also through the work of related artists. A strange way of saying it's one thing, comma, another thing, comma, another thing. That's how I would read it. But how did you come up with the idea to introduce the show, not with a full stop, saying that's the story, but starting it with a comma?
Yeah, the full stop is, of course, a bit like a fin, like an end, right?
Yeah.
And the comma, I mean, that's why I was showing it. It's, of course, it's beautiful to see all these commas and Broodthaers, but also the other artists in the show, like Boetti, for example, or Robert Barry, working with commas and working with typography. Or Dieter Roth did it in the Bastel-Novellen. I don't know how to translate Bastel-Novellen. And but I thought that's on the one hand that's very attractive, but on the other hand I don't want to end up in something you might call concrete poetry, because it seemed too formal for me. So I tried to start to think about the comma, or Broodthaers' probable interest in the comma, which I don't want to say that was his interest. It's something that I can consider about as a curator. Maybe it was this or that, about the comma as a metaphor for editing. No, the comma in the text, a comma can edit a text. It can link things together. It can divide things together. It's very much about space between words. It's about connection between words within language or disconnection. It's about associations as well that come into the text that someone might express by the use of comma. And also I learned about that the comma in French language is even more important than, as an example, than in German or English language, because there are less rules for the use of the comma. So the comma allows more space for a subjective approach to the use of language from the point of somebody's writing, from the point of view of an author. And of course, I thought, as this is an exhibition about film, the aspect of editing is very important. And I thought whether there might be, or in the exhibition I try to follow this idea, whether there is a parallel between editing in film and language, in a way via the comma.
Yeah, Gilles Deleuze speaks a lot about this idea of and, so that when you want to jump the rules of a constrictive logic, what you do is you produce a series, no? You add one thing to the next thing, they go and, comma, which brings out the expansive quality of Broodthaers' works, that he doesn't necessarily allow himself to be constrained by what would be in different departments. But it also brings out the playful dimension of the work, no? Like a joyful, playful Broodthaers, who is an analytic mind on the one hand, but a quite playful thinker.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Something that also struck me, and that might be a way also to lead over to the second movie we might want to show, is that I grew up thinking that Broodthaers is so much associated with the critique of representation. No, it's all about signs, pictures, and the artificiality and conventions that allow us to read signs and signifiers. I think what this exhibition beautifully brings out, that something closely related to representation is the moment of teaching, didacticism, and pedagogies. No, that the museum is a place of teaching where supposedly we learn what a sign means. So, and that when you want to break up the authoritative logic of the sign, we have to start in the place where it's being taught. And then one of the ironies that I think beautifully plays across the show is this idea of the museum, or the mockery of a museum as a school to which no children are allowed.
Yeah.
But of course, but then a camel enters the museum, and what can you teach a camel? I wonder if you can say a few things about this idea of mediation, teaching, and how the humor and criticism of Broodthaers plays across this idea of the museum as a place of teaching, to which, what's the line? Enfants non permis, the children are not allowed to the museum.
Can we switch on Marie Puck-Broder's microphone? It's on.
It goes like this. It's musée, muséum, enfant non admis.
It's so funny when you read this, because you read it in Broder's film, a film by Charles Baudelaire.
That's right. Yes, I made even a mistake when I had to repeat the sentence.
You repeat the sentence.
But he kept that. I mean, he especially kept this error, because it's ironic, of course, that the child should read the sentence "museum" not for children. The museum is not for children. Voilà, this is the translation.
No, it's nice for me when you read it in that context here, because for me it's also a soundtrack of the exhibition. When you read it, it reappears all 6 or 7 minutes, I think, throughout the show. This sentence reappears, but the sentence also appears on one of the signs, one of the industrial poems that are also exhibited in the show. And on that sign, coincidentally, there is also a lot of commas. But those commas, they fleur around. Like, you don't know what they are doing. They follow their own logic. I always thought maybe this is a picture for the enfant raiding the children, raiding the museum, or using the museum, or not fitting into the museum. No? But it's also this very important installation, Un Jardin d'Hiver, number 2, that's shown in the exhibition. For me, this shows very much about the approach that you just mentioned. And that's in a way that Broodthaers, in 1974, he said, I'm using the exhibition space in a way that I'm interested to use the exhibition. So it's not about the institution showing me, it's about me using the institution. And so he converted the his exhibition space into a film set and used it as a possibility to take a film, to create a new film. And as well, he used the catalog pages, his own catalog pages, or the pages dedicated to him as an artist by the curator, not to document his work in the catalog, but to make an artistic intervention by using the pages to do a work. And maybe that's also what you just mentioned, yeah, the parallel between the museum, or in general the art mediating institution, and the school, to find ways to not be educated, but to use these institutions for your own sake, for your own interests, and to change the rules and logic of that spaces. And I think today it's very common for me as a curator, I'm discussing a catalog with artists, and there will be always an artist in a group show who says, I don't want to be documented. I would rather use the catalog pages for an intervention. And I think, so I want to change the rules of the school to stay in that metaphor. And of course, that's very important and good, but I always think that that's really the first thing that I know that this ever happened was when Broodthaers did this work, Un Jardin d'Hiver. So that's another door that he opened. And that's happening not even with really thinking about Broodthaers in terms to institutional critique, right? It's more like, it's more like the commas on that sign, like raiding the icebox.
Maybe two aspects of that observation are that we are so used to reading artists who perform institutional critique simply as readers. They go into the institution, read how the institution functions, and then give you a reading. And what you're saying is what's special about the Jardin d'Hiver is that it's not just the artist reading the institution, it's the artist using the institution almost as a medium to shoot his own film about bringing a camel into the museum. No? And maybe to just flip back to what we're discussing before, also when we think about how we observe irony in art, no? Usually irony is just understood as a way of being smart, saying one thing and meaning another, while here we have a different kind of irony that changes the reality of the place. No, on the one hand, the museum is mocked as that school without children, basically where no one can learn anything. But in the act of a child saying children are not permitted, in that moment, of course, ironically, the opposite is performed, and the museum that would be a school without children suddenly becomes dedicated to the children who are going to inhabit it through the game that is played in the art, no? Which I think is a different perspective on Broodthaers, different from how we usually see him as an analytic mind. Here it's somebody rededicating the place of mediation, of teaching, to a spirit where we inhabit the place. Those people who are exactly not supposed to be there inhabit the place, but maybe not even in the key of having to learn anything. No,
exactly, yeah. In a way, there is also a historical parallel to what you say, because the Palais des Beaux-Arts in Brussels, where the exhibition took place, in the same year it was squatted by people who felt that they should criticize that institution. I think that's probably something Marie Puck would know better, but I think that was a lot of students and artists from Brussels that squatted the Palais des Beaux-Arts. And in the beginning, Broodthaers joined the squatters and was one of them. But then later he stepped out and took his own position. But it's exactly the year where this work was made, when the Palais des Beaux-Arts, how you put it, was used and squatted by people who, so to say, don't belong there.
Yeah.
Or that people that perform a behavior that would normally not be welcomed by the institution. Yeah. Let's put it like this.
I think I would have two more questions, and then maybe we can show another film, and would be happy to take questions from the audience too. One motif that appears in the work is that also of nostalgia. No, the centerpiece that gives the title to the exhibition, The Raven and the Fox, starts with a poem where Broodthaers speaks about barely even remembering the story of the fox and the raven. So he brings up a lot of figures, colored animals, the painting, the architect, as something that he barely even remembers. So it seems like he's speaking to the history of art as something that is a past, that is almost disappeared, where he becomes an agent of a memory that is almost slipping away. No, and I guess some of the other pieces in the show echo this motif as the artist speaking back to a disappearing history, or bringing where modern art or let's say the history of art becomes a postcard from a different time. As in the center, in another piece in the exhibition, where Broodthaers is filming postcards found on the flea market. And you were speaking to me about this idea of the artist as a mediator of something lost and forgotten, if I remember that correctly.
Well, yeah, this is a film. I mean, Broodthaers, he uses a lot of materials that are from antiquariate bookshops. Shops with old stuff, things that you find. So the postcard that you mentioned, it was that's shown in the film Chère Petite Sœur, Dear Little Sister. That's a postcard that was written in 1901 from a little town in the north of Belgium, next to the North Sea, and it's a touristic postcard. And he must have found it in the 60s or 70s in a shop, in probably a bookshop that also has old postcards in store. And the interesting thing is that he dedicates a film to a postcard that was written 70 years before by a person totally unknown to Broodthaers, of course, and obviously a younger girl. And it's a postcard with a quite naive text. The text says more or less, Dear Little Sister, Chère Petite Sœur, that's the title of the film, as I mentioned. This should give you an experience of how the sea looks when there's a storm. And that's, of course, a beautiful sentence, because no picture, and especially probably not a commodity, not a postcard, will ever be able to convey the experience of the sublime, so to say, of the experience of nature, of a storm, or of mountains, or whatever. And at the same time, that's a modern aesthetic problem, that each piece of art, in a way, always can just function as a mediator for a certain experience, but that experience can never be embodied by the object or by the art object, but it can just made accessible in the act of reading or viewing this object, I think. And that's so interesting that Broodthaers approaches this question not from like making a work about William Turner, as an example, but he's finding it in the ephemeren, the ephemeral, you say, in the ephemeral, or in a souvenir, in a memorabilia by another person. And I think that makes this act of remembering especially beautiful and poetic. But as we talked about this film so much now, I would suggest that we look at it.
And just before that, just to add one quick observation. As we're speaking about ironies and performed contradictions, I find it striking in this title piece of the exhibition that on the one hand, I guess, you have this dimension of nostalgia, the artist as somebody who remembers that which is almost forgotten, almost eclipsed. But at the same time, the poem also says, the raven is singing, the fox is singing. So on the one hand, we have the nostalgia. On the other hand, we have the singing fox and the raven, the animals that perform. And where there's another dimension of Broodthaers' words, I guess, where what Mary Puig was saying in the beginning, where it's improvised, it's in the moment, it's spontaneous, and the nostalgia is offset by something that's very in the here and now, as in the next film, I guess. No? An improvisation with a postcard of the lost sublime.
And the title of the film is Cher Pétisseur. It's black and white. It's 4 minutes long. It has no sound, and it's made in 1972. And I want to ask you to please be aware of how beautifully Broodthaers uses the possibility of subtitles in that film. Okay, thank you very much. That was the film.
Are there any questions from the audience? Anything you would like to ask, would like to know about the experience?
Thank you so much for your talk. It's very elucidating. Broodthaers is an artist that interests me greatly. He's like a mystery to me. So your talk was so interesting. What I was thinking with the idea of the comma is the idea of, certainly in the English language, we use the comma as a breath, and then we're on to the next thought. So this idea of continuity, which actually relates to the motion of film as well, is very interesting. The other thing I thought was he might have been the first artist, one of the first ones, that made us interested in the process of trying to make a work of art. Because that one with the water, it's the process of actually trying to create something which fails. And this is a very, very interesting thought. And I think a lot of artists are dealing with this idea today.
Positively, yes. No? And one thing is to record the process, to dramatize the process. I guess, Søren, as you were saying, is also to use the institution to continue the process. They want an exhibition. Actually, I will use it as a film set. That is definitely so. No. Also, what struck me, the comma that always points onwards. What I found interesting, what I didn't know, and Søren explained to me today, is Broodthaers' use of metaphor in relating to the different media. So on the one hand, we have the metaphor of the fox and the raven to describe the vanities of the art world, but then there are also these metaphors through which he relates to existing media, if only to turn them into something else. So I didn't know that whenever he speaks about tableau, the painting, he compares it to bateau, the boat. So the sailboat, the sail, the canvas of the sailing boat, and the canvas on which things are painted. What I found even more fascinating with film, I heard today that film is fish. And maybe, Søren, you could explain why the metaphor for the film is the fish.
I don't know if this is 100% true. No, Broodthaers made a film called A Project for a Fish, A Project for a Film. So I wondered what is the relation between fish and film for Broodthaers. And now you have to help me with the English word for schuppen.
Scales.
Scales, of course, a fish is put together from many scales. And if you ever looked at fish in a tank, or were a tank lover, as I was between the age of 14 to 16, observing fish in all my free time, you see that the movement of fish is a very strange one. The scales don't move. Scales is put together from many uncountable scales. The fish is moving, but not the scales. It's like with film. Film is put together from many, many, many single images, and the single images itself, it doesn't move. But the film, of course, moves. And in this film, Project for a Fish, Project for a Film, that's exactly what Broodthaers is doing or playing with. He used the subtitling machine to transfer hand drawings directly to the film material, which firstly is formally very interesting because the subtitling machine is made to transfer letters to the material. So basically thin, straight or slightly curved lines, but no hand drawings. So of course it's failing. I like that very much, what you were saying about the idea of failure. So on the one hand, the machine, the technology is failing to perfectly transfer the drawings to the film material. And by exactly that, it's becoming formally a very interesting piece of film. And secondly, it's interesting because and that's the idea of the fish or the single scales of the fish, is that, of course, if you use this machine and transfer hand drawings, you have only static images, which is against the logic of film that's normally about a moving thing being filmed, yeah? Except in the endings or beginnings of film, when they, for example, show the credits or the titles. Then you have the static images. And in that way, Broodthaers is filming the end and the beginning of the film. So he turns them both 180 degrees around. And in the film, he shows drawings of fishes. And the fishes are cut in two halves. And we don't see the half with the head, we just see the back. And he puts them, he turns them 90 degrees. So in a way, they look like a couple of bottles on a board or something. And that's what he did with the film. He took out the natural movement of the film. He cut off the head from the fish.
Which I guess is the power of poetry, that you can turn material into a metaphor, and you have a fish film and a bateau tableau. Any more questions from the audience? Oh yeah.
I have a question to Søren and also to you, Jan, related to being an artist and being a poet. You started saying that he stopped being a poet and he became an artist. I would like to know from you what's your definition and what's the difference and the similarity between poetry and artist and being an artist. Thank you.
I think that the work of he didn't stop doing poetry because his poems will go through his artwork up to the end. He didn't stop and made artworks. I mean, the poetry, as you see in the films, is always present. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. If I said so, like as you just put it, then that was definitely shortening. But I wanted to say, I mean, as a matter of fact, Broodthaers was publishing books with his own poetry until a certain point, and then with his first gallery show, he put them into a plaster or concrete, so that some of the last editions of his published poetry as a symbol. So maybe from my point of view, I wanted to say he entered the economy of the field of visual art and leaving the economy of the field of literary production behind. Of course, he never stopped being a poet, and he definitely always was an artist before.
And since I was responsible for that stupid sentence, I just have to say that it happens when you start a panel and you're nervous. You throw on the machine and you first of all say a couple of things that are definitely wrong, so that eventually you can arrive at a discovery, which is basically to say like what is poetics if not the ability to transform a material and metaphorize. And then we can even get rid of these terms because we see a process and effect. So let's consider that first sentence something that has been overcome by our discussion. But I need to ask one last question talking about material, and maybe on that note we close it. Because putting it together, I mean, a Broodthaers exhibition, I realized has to do with reconstructing installations, and we all know that palm trees play a very, very important role in Broodthaers exhibitions. And the burning question then is, how on earth do you get so many palm trees for an exhibition?
You get them from a guy who has a connection to a Dutch company, which means like you have to build up a contact with a country that has a substantial history in colonialism to get those.
And that's material truth, I guess. And then thank you for listening.
I want thank you.